What in the goddamn hell are you even doing in first class? The words, sharp and venomous, sliced through the hushed cabin of the transatlantic flight. Jennifer Westwood, her face a mask of furious indignation, punctuated her screech with a vicious slap. The sound was a dry, ugly crack, a gunshot in a cathedral of climate-controlled air and muted luxury. It echoed, tearing a hole in the gilded atmosphere of the premium cabin. The 50-odd souls on board froze. A few smartphones, already half-raised, flashed instinctively, but most passengers just stared. A collective gasp caught in their throats. For a suspended moment, there was only the low hum of the engines and the shocked, wide eyes reflecting the unfolding drama. The recipient of the blow, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, swayed slightly. A metallic tang, the unmistakable taste of blood, flooded her mouth. Her cheek exploded with a fiery, searing pain, but when she lifted her head, her eyes were not filled with tears or fear. They were unnervingly cold. A chilling, profound quiet settled over her, a silence more terrifying than any scream, as taut as a hangman's rope. What nobody on that plane, cruising at 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, could possibly comprehend was that this slap wasn't the end of a petty dispute. Oh no, it was the beginning. The first gust of wind in a hurricane of consequences that was about to form right there in their pressurized tube of privilege, a storm that would suck every single one of them into a vortex from which there was no escape. Are you guys ready for this? Because what you're about to hear is going to blow your mind. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this insane story. Just 20 minutes earlier, Eris Thorne had walked onto the aircraft with the quiet, unassuming confidence of a person who had carved her own place in the world through decades of relentless grit and groundbreaking achievement. She was dressed in a simple, elegant gray cashmere sweater, tailored black trousers, and comfortable yet stylish loafers. A well-loved soft leather satchel was slung over her shoulder. She moved with the fluid, unhurried grace of someone who felt at home anywhere in the world. Nothing about her screamed money or influence, and that was precisely how she liked it. As the founder and CEO of Aura, a revolutionary biotech firm that had just received FDA approval for a drug that could change the face of Alzheimer's treatment, Eris was flying from New York to a critical medical conference in Geneva. This trip was monumental, but today she had deliberately booked her ticket under her mother's maiden name, Evelyn Reed, wanting to experience this specific airline, a carrier her company was considering for a multi-million-dollar corporate contract, through the unfiltered lens of a regular customer. What she was about to uncover would detonate everything. Jennifer Westwood clocked her the instant she stepped into the first-class cabin. With nearly 2 decades of service catering to the whims of the ultra-elite, Jennifer prided herself on her almost supernatural ability to distinguish the real first-class passengers from the imposters. She had a sixth sense for it, she often bragged to junior colleagues. The hedge fund titans, the Silicon Valley prodigies, the heiresses dripping in generational wealth, they all had a certain aura. This woman, with her understated attire and lack of ostentatious logos, simply didn't compute. She didn't fit the algorithm of affluence Jennifer carried in her head. "Excuse me." Jennifer's voice was laced with a saccharine condescension that barely masked the steel beneath it, as Eris found her seat, 3A. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Eris looked up, a polite, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips, as she reached into her satchel. "Of course." She produced the pass, her gaze steady, observing Jennifer's every micro-expression as the flight attendant scrutinized the document with an intensity usually reserved for counterfeit currency. "This says Evelyn Reed," Jennifer stated, her eyes narrowing into suspicious slits. "Is that you?" "It was my mother's name," Eris replied, her tone calm and even. "I sometimes use it for personal bookings, a way to honor her." Jennifer's lips tightened into a thin, disapproving line. In her experience, people who played games with names were hiding something. She cast a sweeping glance around the cabin, her eyes briefly cataloging the other passengers. They were all white, all impeccably dressed, all exuding an air of effortless belonging. This woman, this Evelyn Reed, was a glitch in the matrix, a jarring note in an otherwise perfect symphony of wealth. "I'll need to see some additional identification," Jennifer announced, her voice pitched just loud enough to snag the attention of those in the surrounding seats. Several heads swiveled, their expressions a mixture of boredom and mild curiosity. A little in-flight drama was always a welcome diversion. Eris's eyebrows arched a fraction of an inch, but she complied without protest, pulling out her driver's license. Jennifer snatched it and studied it for an absurdly long time, her eyes flicking back and forth between the photograph and Eris's face, as if she were a TSA agent searching for a master of disguise. "Well, it appears to be in order," Jennifer finally conceded, her tone thick with disappointment. She stalked away, but she didn't go far, hovering near the galley, her gaze repeatedly darting back towards Eris, a silent, hostile surveillance. In seat 2B, a man named Marcus Vance leaned towards his companion, Chloe. "Wonder how she swung a first-class ticket," he murmured, his voice a stage whisper that carried easily. "Must have used a boatload of points, or maybe it's some kind of airline employee perk." Chloe nodded, her expression smug. "You can always tell when someone doesn't really belong up here. They just don't have the right carriage." Eris heard every syllable. She felt the sting of their words, a familiar, dull ache. She also noted how Jennifer flitted around the cabin, topping up champagne flutes and offering bowls of warm, gourmet nuts to every other passenger, yet somehow managed to bypass her seat entirely. She felt the subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere when she rose to use the lavatory, the conversations that lulled, the eyes that followed her with a blend of suspicion and disdain. For 30 years, Eris had been at the forefront of neurological research. She had fought tooth and nail for research grants, outmaneuvered corporate rivals, and navigated the treacherous, often political waters of the medical establishment. She had shattered glass ceilings and defied expectations at every turn. Yet here, sitting in a first-class cabin she could have bought and sold 100 times over, she was being made to feel like a trespasser, an interloper, in a world she had more than earned the right to occupy. As the aircraft doors were sealed and the crew prepared for takeoff, Jennifer's suspicion metastasized into something far more aggressive. She summoned her colleague, a younger flight attendant named Sarah, and the two of them marched to Eris's row, their posture radiating a synchronized hostility. "Ma'am," Jennifer's voice was sharp, cutting through the pre-flight announcements. "We're going to need to verify the authenticity of your ticket with ground control." The last vestiges of civility had been stripped away. This was now a public confrontation. The cabin became a theater, and Eris was the unwilling star. Eris carefully placed her noise-canceling headphones on the seat beside her and looked up, her expression a mask of placid inquiry. "I'm sorry, what is there to verify? You've already examined my boarding pass and my driver's license." "There have been irregularities with fraudulently purchased tickets recently," Sarah chimed in, her voice less confident than Jennifer's, but clearly towing the party line. "No such irregularities existed. That seems highly unlikely to disrupt the flight for," Eris countered, her voice remaining perfectly level. "Is this a standard procedure you're performing for every passenger in this cabin?" A splotchy, red flush crept up Jennifer's neck. It's standard procedure when we have a reasonable suspicion that something isn't right. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Reasonable suspicion. Aris felt a familiar tightening in her gut, a ghost of 1,000 similar moments. The security guard following her through a high-end boutique. The maître d' seating her by the kitchen, despite a reservation made weeks in advance. The condescending assumption in a boardroom that she must be the assistant, not the lead scientist. And what precisely has aroused this reasonable suspicion? Aris asked, her voice still quiet, yet it seemed to command the attention of everyone within earshot. Jennifer exchanged a loaded glance with Sarah. You don't seem like one of our typical first-class passengers. The euphemism was so transparent it was insulting. Every single person in that cabin knew exactly what she meant. Aris retrieved her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen with a speed and precision that belied the turmoil brewing within her. To the flight attendants, it probably looked like she was nervously sending a text message. In reality, she was meticulously documenting everything. The time, the names on the crew's badges, the seat numbers of the passengers who were now openly filming the interaction. She also composed a brief, encrypted message to the general counsel of her company. Need legal team on immediate standby. Facing a significant incident of discrimination on flight BA-284, full investigation and immediate response protocol will be required. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to put your phone away, Jennifer snapped. You're interfering with the safety briefing. Aris slowly scanned the cabin. At least a dozen passengers had their phones out, some blatantly live-streaming the confrontation. Not a single one of them had been reprimanded. I see numerous other passengers using their phones, Aris observed coolly. Those passengers aren't being disruptive, Sarah retorted, the logic as flimsy as a paper napkin in a hurricane. The accusation was staggering in its absurdity. Aris had done nothing but occupy the seat she had paid for, respond politely to every invasive question, and comply with every request. Yet, she was being systematically painted as a problem, her very presence a disruption, for the unforgivable crime of being a black woman in first class. The pilot, Captain David Evans, emerged from the cockpit to make his pre-flight rounds and paused, sensing the palpable tension. Is there a problem here? Jennifer immediately morphed into the victim. This passenger is being uncooperative, Captain. She's refusing to comply with our security protocols and won't properly verify her ticket. Aris met the captain's gaze. I have provided both my boarding pass and my valid driver's license, which were confirmed to be a match. I am simply inquiring why I am the only passenger being subjected to this additional level of screening. Captain Evans glanced around, taking in the sea of pointed phones and the charged atmosphere. Let me see the documents, he said, his voice a low grumble. Jennifer reluctantly handed them over. The captain examined them for no more than 5 seconds, a frown creasing his brow. These look perfectly fine to me. What's the issue? We're just being cautious, Jennifer insisted, her bravado beginning to fray at the edges. Perhaps we should just call ground services to be absolutely certain, Sarah added, doubling down. Aris's phone vibrated. A reply from her legal team. Standing by. Document everything. We are monitoring BA-284's departure status. Signal if you require immediate ground intervention. She looked up at the captain, her voice clear and resonant, ensuring every recording device could capture her words. I want it officially noted that I am being subjected to enhanced security measures that are not being applied to any other passenger. I believe this treatment is predicated on my race. I will comply, but I am doing so under duress and formal protest. The word race sent a shockwave through the cabin. Some passengers squirmed uncomfortably. Others leaned in, their interest piqued. The social media streams that had started as a source of mild amusement were now documenting a full-blown civil rights incident unfolding in real time. The airport station manager, a man named Richard Miller, arrived at the gate just as the ground crew was preparing to push the plane back. Jennifer's call had been escalated, and Miller was a man who prided himself on quashing problems with an iron fist. He boarded the aircraft trailed by 2 airport security officers, his face a thundercloud of self-importance. Miller had learned long ago that any display of weakness in these situations was an invitation for chaos. "Where is the problem, passenger?" he boomed, his voice echoing through the silent cabin. "Row 3, seat A," Jennifer replied, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Eris, as if she were identifying a suspect in a police lineup. Miller stomped down the aisle, the security officers flanking him like Praetorian guards. "Ma'am, you need to come with us now. We have to resolve this issue with your ticket." Eris looked up, her composure utterly unshaken. "What issue? My documents have been verified multiple times." "There are questions regarding the authenticity of your booking," Miller stated, pulling the baseless accusation out of thin air. "You need to deplane for further screening." "I will not be deplaning," Eris said, her voice quiet but firm as steel. "I have done nothing wrong, and I have complied with every single one of your crew's requests. If you have a legitimate concern about my ticket, you have the electronic means to verify it while I remain in my seat." Miller's jaw clenched. In his world, challenging his authority was tantamount to a confession of guilt. "Ma'am, you can either deplane voluntarily, or these officers will physically escort you off this aircraft." The threat was naked, brutal. Eris felt the weight of 50 pairs of eyes on her, their phones capturing every humiliating second. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, the accumulated weariness of a lifetime of such battles. She thought of her mother, a brilliant chemist who had been told that women didn't belong in a laboratory. She thought of her grandfather, who had been forced to sit in the back of buses in a country he had fought to defend. "I understand that you believe you are just doing your job," Eris said, her voice resonating with a profound, sorrowful clarity. "But what you are doing right now is an act of illegal discrimination, and it is being recorded for the world to see." "You don't get to lecture me about the law," Miller snarled. "Security, remove her from the plane." And that was when Jennifer Westwood snapped. The last frayed thread of her professional restraint disintegrated. "You know what?" she shrieked, stepping forward until she was looming over Eris. "I am sick and tired of people like you thinking you can just waltz in here acting like you own the place." The slap was a blur of motion, a sudden vicious crack that silenced the entire cabin. Eris's head whipped to the side, a bloom of white-hot pain erupting on her cheek. For one long, breathless moment, the plane felt like it had been plunged into a vacuum. "You think your fake ticket and your entitled attitude give you the right to disrespect us?" Jennifer continued, her voice escalating into a hysterical screech. "This section is for paying customers, not for grifters trying to game the system." Eris slowly, deliberately, turned back to face her assailant. She raised a hand to her stinging cheek. A thin trickle of blood oozed from a small cut where Jennifer's diamond ring had gashed her skin. "Did you just physically assault me?" she asked, her voice deadly calm. Miller finally grasped that the situation had just careened off a cliff. "Everyone just calm down!" he yelled, but his authority had vanished the instant Jennifer had raised her hand. The cabin erupted. Passengers were on their feet, some shouting in outrage, others, shockingly, cheering Jennifer on. Marcus Vance pumped his fist in the air. "It's about time someone had the guts to put these people in their place." But others were appalled. "That was a criminal assault," shouted a woman in seat 4C, a doctor from Boston named Helen Ramirez. "You can't just strike a passenger." "She was asking for it," Chloe Vance retorted, her voice dripping with venom. Maybe now she'll learn a little humility. Aris raised her phone again, her movements measured and precise, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. She dialed a number that, had anyone in the cabin recognized it, would have caused them to faint from shock. It was the direct, private line to the chairman of the board for the airline's parent company. "This is Dr. Eris Thorne," she said into the phone, her voice carrying with absolute clarity in the sudden lull. "I require an immediate legal and executive response on Flight BA-284. I have just been physically assaulted by a member of your cabin crew in front of multiple witnesses." Miller lunged for her phone. "You're not making any calls until we sort this out." Aris snatched the device away. "Do not touch me. I have a legal right to contact my counsel after being assaulted." "Your counsel?" Jennifer laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Who are you going to call? Someone from a billboard ad?" Eris's eyes locked onto Jennifer's, and for the very first time, a dangerous, incandescent light flickered in their depths. "You have absolutely no idea who you just assaulted, do you?" "I know exactly who I hit," Jennifer sneered. "A con artist who thought she could bully her way into a first-class seat." Eris rose slowly from her seat. Her full height, her commanding presence, seemed to suck the air out of the space around her. When she spoke again, her voice was imbued with an authority that sliced through the pandemonium like a surgeon's scalpel. "My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Aura Biotechnology. My company is currently valued at over $20 billion. This airline is one we were considering for an exclusive 9-figure corporate travel contract. And you just made the most catastrophic mistake of your entire life." The words detonated in the cabin. For 3 solid seconds, there was absolute, stunned silence. Then, chaos. Jennifer Westwood's face drained of all color, leaving a pasty white mask of horror. That's not possible," she stammered, but her voice was a ghost of a whisper. Miller was fumbling for his phone, his fingers shaking as he frantically tried to Google something, anything, to refute what he had just heard. But the pit that had just opened in his stomach told him he was about to confirm his worst nightmare. "She's lying," Marcus Vance shouted from his seat, trying to regain the narrative. "There's no way she's a CEO. Look at what she's wearing." But it was too late. Other passengers were already on their phones, their expressions shifting from morbid curiosity to slack-jawed astonishment. On screen after screen, the same professional headshot appeared. Dr. Eris Thorne, a luminary in the world of medical science, the same woman now standing in the aisle with a bloody cheek where a flight attendant had just struck her. Dr. Ramirez held up her phone, displaying Eris's Forbes profile to the passengers around her. "Oh my God, it's true, Dr. Eris Thorne, CEO of Aura, Time Magazine's Innovator of the Year." The revelation ripped through the cabin like a shockwave. The people who had been recording for a bit of salacious entertainment now realized they were sitting on the biggest corporate scandal of the decade. The hashtag Dr. CEO Assaulted started trending worldwide on X before the plane had even been moved from the gate. Jennifer collapsed into an empty seat, her legs giving way beneath her. "I didn't know," she whimpered. "How could I have possibly known?" Eris's response was like a shard of ice. "You weren't supposed to know my title to treat me with common decency. You were supposed to treat me with respect because I am a human being and a paying customer on your airline." Miller was now on the phone with someone at corporate headquarters, his voice cracking with panic. "Yes, sir, I understand the gravity of the situation. No, sir, I had no idea who she was. Yes, sir, a flight attendant did physically assault her." The 2 security officers, who moments before had been ready to drag Eris off the plane, were now frozen in place, looking like statues of bewildered incompetence. Their superior had just ordered them to assault the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, a woman who likely had more sway over their continued employment than their own boss did. Captain Evans returned from the cockpit, drawn by the escalating chaos, to find his cabin in utter pandemonium. When Miller gave him a frantic, whispered briefing, the pilot's face turned the color of ash. "You allowed a flight attendant to strike a passenger who is also a CEO?" Evans hissed. "Are you certifiably insane?" Meanwhile, the social media firestorm was turning into an inferno. Farce airline racism and Tontartarned flyer beware were trending globally. Major news outlets were scrambling, picking up the story directly from passenger live streams. The airline's stock began to nosedive in after-hours trading as the story went viral. Through it all, Eris remained the epicenter of calm. She methodically continued her documentation, taking a clear photograph of her injured cheek, recording video testimonials from sympathetic passengers like Dr. Ramirez, and making detailed notes about every single person who had participated in, enabled, or witnessed the incident. "Ma'am, Dr. Thorne." Captain Evans approached her, his voice filled with a new, profound respect. "On behalf of the flight crew, I want to offer my most sincere apology for what has transpired. This is utterly and completely unacceptable." "Captain Evans," Aris replied, glancing at his name tag, "I appreciate your sentiment, but apologies are a bandage on a bullet wound. What happened here today is not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a diseased corporate culture that desperately needs a cure." Jennifer, still slumped in her seat, looked up, her eyes wild with desperation. "Please, Dr. Thorne, I made a terrible mistake. I swear, I'm not like this. I'm so sorry." Eris turned her full, unwavering attention to her attacker. "Are you not? Have you never judged a passenger by the color of their skin and assumed they couldn't afford their seat? Have you never offered a lower standard of service to customers who didn't fit your preconceived notion of wealth? This didn't begin with your hand striking my face. It began the moment your bias decided I was less worthy than every other person in this cabin." The raw truth of her words hung in the air. Several passengers looked away, a flicker of guilty recognition in their eyes. Dr. Ramirez stood up. "Dr. Thorne, I witnessed the entire exchange. I am a physician, and I am prepared to give a formal statement documenting your injuries. I also have most of this recorded on my phone." "Thank you, Dr. Ramirez," Aris said. "I will need that." Marcus Vance, who had been so vocal in his support of Jennifer, was now frantically trying to delete the videos he had posted online. But it was far too late. They had already been screen captured and mirrored across the internet, his face and his hateful words now part of the permanent digital record. Miller received another call, and what little color was left in his face drained away. "Yes, sir. She is still on the aircraft. No, sir, we have not departed. Yes, sir, I understand the entire board of directors has been notified." He approached Eris, his hands trembling visibly. "Dr. Thorne, I have been instructed to inform you that the airline's parent company is convening an emergency board meeting. They wish to speak with you immediately." Eris glanced at her watch. "Tell them I will speak with them when I am ready. At this moment, I am focused on collecting evidence and ensuring this entire incident is documented with forensic precision." The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted with the force of a tectonic plate. Miller, who had boarded the plane like a conquering general, was now a terrified messenger boy, taking orders from the woman he had threatened and tried to have arrested. Jennifer made one last, pitiful plea. "Dr. Thorne, please, I have 2 children. I'll lose my house. I can't lose my job. It was a horrible mistake. I can change. I can learn from this." Eris regarded her for a long, silent moment. "Jennifer, your children deserve a mother who treats every human being with dignity and respect, Perhaps losing this job will be the catalyst that helps you become that person." The finality in her voice was absolute. Jennifer Westwood's career was over. At precisely 9:17 p.m., Eris's phone rang. A name flashed on the screen that would have made anyone in the aviation industry weak at the knees: Sir Reginald Croft, the legendary and notoriously unforgiving chairman of the airline's parent conglomerate. Eris answered, putting the call on speaker. The cabin was now so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "Eris, this is Reginald Croft." The crisp British accent filled the silence. "I have just been made aware of this appalling situation. First and foremost, are you all right? Are you injured?" "Sir Reginald," Eris's voice was steady and clear, "I have a laceration on my cheek where your flight attendant struck me with her ring, but I am far more concerned about the systemic rot this incident has exposed within your organization. We are taking this with the utmost seriousness, I assure you," Croft continued, his voice tight with fury. "The entire board is on this call. We want you to know that you have our unequivocal support. We will take any and all actions you deem necessary." Miller, seeing his career flashing before his eyes, made one final, suicidal gamble. "Sir Reginald, there may have been misunderstandings on both sides." "Mr. Miller," Croft's voice dropped several degrees, becoming lethally cold. "Are you, in any way, suggesting that my esteemed colleague, Dr. Thorne, bears any responsibility for being physically assaulted by one of your employees?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Miller knew that any answer he gave would sever the last thread holding his career in place. Eris took command. "Reginald, I want a full independent investigation, not just into this flight, but into your hiring protocols, your training manuals, and your corporate culture from the top down. This cancer didn't grow in a vacuum." "Consider it done," Croft agreed without hesitation. "What do you need from us right now?" "I need the entire crew involved in this incident immediately removed from duty. I need the formal statements of all willing passengers collected and legally preserved. And I need your global crisis management team activated 5 minutes ago. This story is already a global headline." As if on cue, Miller's phone began to buzz incessantly with calls from CNN, the BBC, Reuters, and the New York Times, all demanding a statement. Eris then addressed the entire cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to those of you who spoke out against what was happening tonight. Dr. Ramirez, your courage will not be forgotten. To those of you who cheered when I was assaulted, I urge you to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourselves what kind of person that makes you." She turned to Jennifer, whose face was now a mess of tears and running mascara. "Jennifer, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from this aircraft. Your formal termination papers will be sent by courier within 24 hours. The sobs grew louder, but Eris was not finished. "Mr. Miller, you are also terminated. Your catastrophic failure to de-escalate, your active participation in discriminatory harassment, and your utter lack of professional judgment have made your position indefensible." Miller started to sputter a protest, but Eris silenced him with a single, sharp glance. "The security officers who were prepared to unlawfully detain me based on zero evidence will be suspended without pay, pending a full investigation into their conduct. Captain Evans, you will be required to file a complete incident report with both the FAA and the ESA." The speed and ruthless efficiency of her actions were breathtaking. This wasn't corporate spin. This was justice, being dispensed with surgical precision in real time. "Furthermore," Eris announced, her voice ringing with authority, "this airline will be immediately implementing sweeping changes. Every single employee, from the baggage handlers to the board members, will undergo mandatory, rigorous anti-bias and de-escalation training. We will establish a fully anonymous, third-party managed system for reporting incidents of discrimination. And we will be partnering with leading civil rights organizations to conduct a full audit of all our corporate practices. Dr. Ramirez began to clap, and a moment later, others joined in. The applause that filled the cabin wasn't just for Eris's response. It was a spontaneous ovation for witnessing raw, unadulterated justice being served. Marcus Vance, realizing his own viral videos were now key pieces of evidence in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the airline, tried to become invisible in his seat. But Aris's gaze found him. "Mr. Vance, your gleeful celebration of a violent assault on a black woman has been recorded and broadcast around the world. While I have no control over how your employer or your community will respond to seeing those videos, I can tell you this. You are hereby banned for life from flying on this airline or any of its partner carriers." Vance's face turned a shade of purple. "You can't do that. I'm a diamond-level frequent flyer." "Not anymore," Aris replied, her voice flat and final. "Security will be escorting you off the plane as well." The systematic takedown of every person who had wronged her was as methodical as it was complete. Aris wasn't just reacting to an incident. She was sending a message that would echo from the tarmac to the boardroom. Actions have consequences, and power in the right hands is a potent force for justice. As news vans began to swarm the terminal, Aris received a text from her company's head of communications. "Ma'am, we have over 100 media interview requests and counting. What is our official response?" Aris typed a simple reply. "Schedule a global press conference for tomorrow morning. Tonight, we focus on our principles and our people. The world can wait." The dominoes of consequence began to fall before the plane was even towed back to the gate. Jennifer Westwood was the first. Escorted off the aircraft by a new team of grim-faced security, her career in aviation ended in a blaze of public humiliation. Her tearful pleas of, "I didn't know who she was," captured on 100 smartphones. Within hours, the video of her striking Dr. Thorne had amassed over 10 million views. Amateur internet sleuths had unearthed her social media profiles, revealing a long history of racially charged posts and complaints about undeserving people. By the next morning, her formal termination letter arrived. No severance, no benefits, just a single sentence stating she was being dismissed for gross misconduct, a scarlet letter that would make her virtually unemployable in any service industry again. Richard Miller's downfall was even more precipitous. The airport authority, desperate to distance themselves from the PR nightmare, released a statement announcing his immediate termination less than 12 hours after the incident. His 2 decades of experience were wiped out in a single evening of catastrophic misjudgment. The FAA launched a formal investigation into his conduct, which threatened not only massive fines, but a permanent ban from holding any position in airport management or security. The security officers were suspended indefinitely, their body cam footage providing damning evidence of their willingness to escalate a situation based on nothing more than the biased word of a flight attendant. Marcus Vance's life imploded in spectacular fashion. His employer, a prestigious investment bank, fired him the next day after the videos he posted went viral. His country club membership was revoked. His wife, Chloe, whose own snide remarks were captured on audio, became a social pariah, asked to step down from the board of a prominent children's charity. Their world of privilege, built on a foundation of casual cruelty, crumbled to dust in less than a day. For the airline, the fallout was apocalyptic. The Department of Justice announced a sweeping civil rights investigation into the company's practices. The airline's stock plummeted by 12% at the opening bell, erasing nearly $1 billion in market value. Major corporate clients, including several Fortune 100 companies, immediately suspended their travel contracts, demanding proof of systemic change. The incident became a global flashpoint, a case study in corporate malfeasance and the insidious nature of everyday racism. Other airlines scrambled to launch internal reviews, terrified of harboring their own Jennifer Westwoods and Richard Millers. The Flight Attendants Union issued a powerful statement condemning the assault and announcing a new industry-wide initiative for mandatory anti-bias training. For Eris, the assault was not a trauma to be endured, but a weapon to be wielded. The incident gave her the political capital and overwhelming public support to enact the kind of deep, structural reforms she had long championed. She announced the creation of a $25 million endowment to fund diversity in aviation scholarships. She personally led a task force with civil rights leaders to rewrite the playbook on passenger rights and customer service. She instituted a strict, lifetime ban policy for any passenger or employee found to be engaging in discriminatory behavior. Her message, amplified by every major news network, was brutally simple. Dignity is not a luxury upgrade. Respect is not reserved for the front of the plane. And in the 21st century, there will be zero tolerance for the kind of bigotry that had festered in the dark for far too long. The world was watching, and under the harsh glare of the spotlight, change was no longer an option. It was a necessity. 1 week later, Aris sat across from a renowned journalist in a television studio, the faint mark on her cheek a visible testament to the ordeal. She was poised, her voice calm and measured, devoid of anger. She spoke not as a victim, but as a leader who had stared into the abyss of human prejudice and had chosen to build a bridge across it. "What happened to me on that flight was not an anomaly," she began, her gaze fixed on the camera. "It was a symptom of a much larger disease. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts, a million assumptions made every day about who belongs where, who deserves respect, and who can be dismissed." The journalist leaned in. "You chose not to reveal your identity until after the assault. Why?" Aris nodded. "Because my identity should have been irrelevant. I wanted to see how our systems treat the anonymous customer, the person without a title, without a public profile. An executive is too often shielded from the harsh realities their customers face. I needed to feel it myself. And what I felt was a culture that had allowed prejudice to cloak itself in the uniform of authority." She spoke of the flood of emails and letters she had received, thousands of stories from people of all backgrounds who had faced similar humiliation. She detailed the sweeping changes her airline was implementing, challenging her competitors to do the same. "We are instituting what we call the Thorn Standard," she explained. "It's simple. Every single human being who interacts with our company will be treated with absolute dignity. We are retraining our people not just to avoid bias, but to become active allies in creating an environment of inclusivity." When asked if she could forgive her attackers, Eris's response was a masterclass in compassionate leadership. "I hold no personal hatred for them. They are products of a system that failed to teach them better. But forgiveness does not absolve them of consequences. They lost their jobs because their actions were a betrayal of our most fundamental human values. True forgiveness, for me, is dedicating myself to ensuring that no one ever has to experience what I did." She announced the formation of the Aura Initiative for Dignity in Travel, a $100 million foundation funded personally by her, designed to combat discrimination across the entire transportation sector. "Change doesn't come from punishment alone," she declared. "It comes from building new structures, fostering new attitudes, and rewriting the very definition of service." The interview concluded with Eris looking directly into the camera, her voice resonating with the quiet power of someone who had been tested by fire and had emerged as tempered steel. "To every person who has ever been made to feel small, to feel like you don't belong, your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And there are people in power who will fight alongside you. To those who might see a reflection of themselves in the behavior of those who mistreated me, know this: it is never too late to choose a different path. It starts with the simple, revolutionary act of treating every person you meet with respect. The public response was a tidal wave of support. The airline's reputation, once in tatters, began to rebuild on a new foundation of trust and social responsibility. The incident on Flight BA-2084 became a watershed moment, a turning point in the conversation about corporate accountability. 6 months later, Dr. Eris Thorne stood on the stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The faint scar on her cheek was barely visible, a subtle reminder of the battle she had fought and won. "When that flight attendant struck me," she began, her voice filling the cavernous hall, "she thought she was asserting her power. What she was actually doing was revealing a fundamental choice that each of us faces every single day." She let the silence hang for a moment, her eyes sweeping over the assembled audience of global leaders, titans of industry, and heads of state. Every time you witness an injustice, no matter how small, you are presented with a choice. You can be a passive bystander, or you can be an active ally. You can accept the world as it is, or you can demand that it be what it should be. The audience was rapt. I was lucky that day. I had a platform. I had resources. But most people who are targeted by prejudice and hate do not. They rely on the moral courage of strangers. They rely on people like Dr. Ramirez, who saw something wrong and refused to be silent. They rely on you. Her voice grew in intensity, a call to action that echoed around the globe. The question is not whether bias exists. We know it does. The question is, what are you going to do about it? When you see someone being followed in a store, will you say something? When you hear a bigoted joke in the boardroom, will you challenge it? When you witness a human being stripped of their dignity on a plane, in a restaurant, on the street, will you lend them your voice? She leaned forward, her passion palpable. Real change doesn't start in parliaments or in C-suites. It starts in the human heart. It starts when enough of us decide that dignity is not a commodity, that respect is not contingent on the color of one's skin or the balance in one's bank account. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. So I ask you to make a choice. Leave this place today and commit to being the person who stands up. Be the passenger who says, "This is wrong." Be the colleague who reports harassment. Be the leader who refuses to tolerate intolerance. Her final words were a powerful crescendo, a message of empowerment and a stark warning. Because here is the simple truth that Jennifer Westwood and Richard Miller never understood. Dignity has no seating class, respect has no price tag, and justice is not determined by what cabin you can afford. It is the inalienable right of every human being to be treated with decency. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And the next time someone has the audacity to tell you that you don't belong somewhere you have every right to be, you look them in the eye and you remind them of this story. Remind them that assumptions are the currency of fools, that power can shift in the blink of an eye, and that basic human decency isn't just good morals, it's good business. The auditorium exploded into a thunderous standing ovation. Because you never ever know who owns the damn plane. What did you guys think of that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were on that flight? Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with everyone you know. Because stories like this need to be heard. Until next time, stand tall, speak up, and fly with dignity.